Simon is going to be presenting the challenge ahead for OEMs based upon the Red Article 3.3. Simon, the floor is yours.
Lovely, thanks very much, Chris. Actually, I'm only going to be talking about the challenge ahead for OEMs. I'm not going to talk about Red 3.3, so sorry about that. So yeah, Simon Dunkley. I work for a company called Itron, which is a US-based company. We are in the energy space, so sort of 10, 15 years ago, primarily what we were in was smart meters, electricity, gas, and water meters like that. And in fact, if you look in your cupboards back home, you'll probably find a fair number of Itron meters there as well. But given the competition in the market, particularly from the Far East, it's becoming ever more difficult to make money making just meters. So we have moved much further into the wider energy space, and I will. We've moved into the wider energy space, and so we're moving into sort of instrumenting the low voltage networks, also moved into smart street lighting and other IoT type applications as well. So that's where we are. But before I talk a bit more about that, content of what I'm going to talk about, I will go on a little bit more about what Itron is, then set out, kind of amplify the messages that Richard and Joe have given earlier on what the CRA means for manufacturers, and then some observations from me, and that's only just a start of observations. I'm sure you're all making your own observations as well, but then I'll pull that all together, hopefully with some with a call to arms message there. So. As I say, Itron background, smart meters, LV network management, lighting, and smart cities. Because we come from the energy network background, security means a lot to us. I used to work for a company called Silver Spring Networks. We were taken over by Itron, so we were only in the networking space, and I know that the company was literally built from security right from the start. It wasn't a network that we had that we built security into. So, and I know that's one of the reasons why Itron bought our company, was because of the security expertise that was within the company. However, I must say that that's not me. I'm from the regulatory and the standards group. I'm not an expert on cybersecurity, so just want to set that expectation. But so far as the company is concerned, our security management based on 27001 and 27017 for cloud services, and all the usual NIST cybersecurity framework, and we follow the 853 principles there as well. So all the good stuff on code reviews, on penetration testing, all the sort of stuff that you would normally expect. So as far as I'm concerned, I don't want to be too arrogant on behalf of the company. We know that from a cybersecurity perspective, we're good. There are no technical requirements within the CRA that we have a problem with. The concern that we have is how can we demonstrate that according to the regulations within the CRA. We are also finally, yes, as hopefully most people in this room, because I imagine there aren't many products out there that don't have some form of radio in it, most people are compliant with the RED, the forerunner of the CRA, since August of last year. So what are we doing with Itron in preparation for the CRA? So reviewing the legislation. I'm afraid I probably am one of those sad people that has read the CRA right from the start to the finish. And that's some of the learnings that I've got from that is what I'm going to be talking about here now. Also keeping an eye on the various pronouncements that are coming out from the European Commission and coming out from NISA. And there is, to be fair, quite a lot of good stuff there. So the European Commission recently issued a 70-page clarificatory document on what the CRA means, and also NISA has relatively recently produced something called Secure by Design Handbook or something like that. So keep an eye out for that sort of stuff. It's worthwhile reading some of that. I'm working closely not only with the colleagues here at IOTSF, but also ESMIG, which was the used to be called the European Smart Meters Industry Group. It's a bit wider than that now. Low Power Radio Association and the DLMS UA colleagues as well. So there's a lot of dialogue going on with industry at the moment. And one of the main things that I'm doing is or has been tracking the standards, and Richard and Joe have already talked about that in their talks. So just to recap, there are the horizontal standards, 4 of them there, and then there are, I think, 26 vertical standards, or at least 26 vertical standards. Some of those actually may have been split up into more than that, so that we probably are north of the 30 figure that Richard talked about earlier. So those are the standards: EN 40001-1, 2, 3, and 4. 1 is vocabulary, so you kind of need that to understand all of the other standards, and then you've got the principles for cyber resilience, the vulnerability handling that Richard talked about earlier, which has a draft publication date, I understand, of November 2026. And then we've got the generic security requirements, which was derived from 1831. So we're tracking what's going on there and actually trying to get involved with it as well. I'm working on one of the vertical standards, which is the Smart Meter Gateway one, and frankly, that takes up about as much time as I'm able to put into it. So unfortunately, I have drifted away a little bit from the horizontal work over the last 6 months or so. And what I'm then doing is adapting the Itron policies. As I say, we've got no concern about the technical content of our products, but we do need to make sure that our policies are in place and aligned with those policies and processes that are expected by the CRA. But I am aware that we are in a privileged position because I am given time to go along and get involved with this. So hopefully I can pass some of that privilege on to you guys and help UK industry to get in a good place themselves. Manufacturers and the CRA. So I'm speaking on behalf of Itron now at this IOTSF event, but Richard and I both represent BSI when we go to the standards meetings. But what I say here is not necessarily, in fact, it probably won't be the opinion of BSI. So occasionally my opinion comes in here, and sometimes I go on a Lemescu-esque rant about some of the stuff that's coming through. I mean, broadly, as Joe said this morning, it's a laudable exercise. Like PSTI, this is something that needs to happen. European and British industry does need to make sure that it is aware of the cybersecurity requirements and is aware that it needs to develop products that are cyber secure. But in my opinion, the way that the CRA has been pulled together and the way the standards have been have been defined by the European Commission is just too heavy duty. And that provides little information to the end customer. Come on some more about that detail in a moment. So delving down into the details, I did it so you don't have to, but these are all of the articles within the Cyber Resilience Act which affect manufacturers such as us. So I'm not talking about authorized representatives or importers or distributors or open source software stewards. There are additional articles that are linked to those, and there's a whole load of other stuff that is applicable to the test houses and national bodies. So these are the articles that we need to be worried about. I'm not going to dwell on all of them. I've highlighted the ones that are the most important, Article 13 and 14, and Richard has talked about those. 53 shalls in Article 13, 27 shalls in Article 14. So the main stuff are the obligations of the manufacturers, but there are various other reporting obligations in there as well. The shalls here link into Annexes 1, 2, and 7 of the CRA. It's all very dry, but I would suggest that you do have a read of those because it is kind of important, and I'm pointing to this later on. So Annex 1 are the essential cybersecurity requirements of the products itself, which is the 1831 standard. This is essentially what the red cyber was all about. But then there's some additional stuff coming in here as well, which you need to be aware of. Firstly, there is information and instructions to users. So you need to make sure you understand that and are giving information and instructions to your users. And also content of the technical documentation. So basically, this is the technical file that you put onto your server, just in case you get picked up by an MSA to be assessed. So I'll be picking up on some of those articles in a moment. So these are the observations, and there's one of my opinions coming in here again. So the horizontal standards demand significant detail to be documented. So it's difficult enough complying with the Cyber Resilience Act, but then actually documenting to the level of detail that apparently the European Commission wants is pretty hard work. The guys that are working in the standards have done their best to make sure that things are not too heavy, but inevitably, if you follow the standards to the letter, you need to produce an awful lot of documentation. I mean, from the RED, I mean, I'm sure, as some of you, many of you maybe, have been involved with red cyber assessments. I certainly have, from relatively simple small water meters right the way through to our top-of-the-range electricity meters. And it's pretty hard work. There's a lot of documentation goes in there. I mean, literally coming to over 100 pages for us. If you go to a laboratory, or if you go to a laboratory and they do the work for you, they're going to have to do a lot of work, and it will cost you a lot of money. But that's just the way it is, and that's how it has to be done. So I think that they are asking for too much information there. So one of the things, for example, that they do is you have to document what the design of your product is. Okay, that's fair enough. But you then need to take one of your products, put it on a bench, and prove that it does what you said it did, which to me is utterly bonkers, because you're signing off in your declaration of conformity that it is what you said it would do. So how much effort do you put in to doing all that? That's something that you as an individual company need to do. I mean, contrast that with the radio standards. I mean, in there you do need to measure. So, for example, if you've got a radio and it has to comply with certain emission standards, then you do need to switch it on, because you know it's designed to work in a certain way, but you don't know actually what the output will be. And so that's why it makes sense to do all those detailed measurements for those standards, but not, in my opinion, for the CRA. So you, as companies, need to think about what level of detail to demonstrate. So what are you going to put into your technical file, and what are you going to wait until you get pinged by an MSA and say, well, actually, we think we can give you this additional information on top of this. But what you need to do is to make sure you've got an audit trail of the product design. So the scope of CRA is not just the product itself. It goes right the way from the conception, right the way through design, manufacture, and then even to decommissioning as well, because there are requirements within the CRA which mean that you need to make sure that your product or your customers are able to easily take data off the product and put it onto their server or upload it onto a new product. So you need an audit trail of that. So that definitely needs to be in place, because you can't really do that after the event if you get pinged by an MSA. And also you need to process the compliance as well. You need to make sure that you are demonstrating that maybe on a 6-monthly basis you are revisiting the risk assessment that you carried out once you first designed the product, because I know there are a lot of companies, they will do a risk assessment, a cybersecurity risk assessment, right at the start, then stick it in the cupboard and not look at it again. That's probably not a good idea, and the CRA explicitly calls it out. You must do that, and you must be able to demonstrate that you can do that. So reporting obligations, Richard's talked about this earlier. This has got a busy chart. I'm not going to go into the detail down here, but this kind of highlights the fact that the concept of exploitable vulnerabilities and actively exploited vulnerabilities, you kind of need to get your head around the details of what's going on there, but I haven't got time to talk about that now. But so far as reporting obligations are concerned, from September 2026, as Richard and Joe said earlier, you've got to do vulnerability reporting into the EU vulnerability database, which was set up last year. Also incident reporting into the single reporting platform. I'll talk about that in a moment. Also, you do need customer customer reporting as well. So if there has been an issue associated with your product, you need to make sure that your customer is aware of that. And then there also potentially, if you have an issue with the product, potentially there are many other reports you need to do associated with other regulations. So Data Protection Act, GDPR, NIS2 and CSA2, which is coming in the future. Potentially, if you have an issue, you may have to report this 4, 5, 6, 7 times. That's quite an overhead. That's something you need to bear in mind. The vulnerability reporting standard, that's the one that's going to be coming out in November. Most people in the industry believe that that's overly burdensome. You'll have to work out yourselves when you get it in front of yourself, but that's a problem. But even though it's so burdensome, I'm not convinced that it absolutely links up with all the CRA obligations, in particular the detail of what needs to go into the EUVD or the detail of what needs to go into the single reporting platform if you have an incident. Then some other observations, definitions and calibration. So vulnerability severity or an incident severity. Vulnerability being the underlying issues with a product. There inevitably are going to be many tens, hundreds of those with a product. That's just the way it is, and as a responsible company, you're going to be patching those. Hopefully, incidents, there won't be too many cybersecurity incidents that you have to report, but nevertheless, there still is the concept of incident severity. But within the regulation, it doesn't actually differentiate between severity of vulnerability and incidents. This is what a severe incident is, something that negatively affects or is capable of negatively affecting the ability of a product with digital elements to protect the availability, authenticity, integrity, or confidentiality of sensitive or important data or functions. That's pretty wide open. You know, that could be many things that go on with the product. So how do we, in reporting into the reporting system, how do we decide when something is a sufficiently severe incident to be reported or not? And then also, how do you report that into the platform? I don't know, Chris, whether these slides are going to be circulated afterwards, but there's a hyperlink in there to the single reporting platform. There is a page on the European Commission's website there. But some comments there that I'm hearing from colleagues within the industry is, ironically, people are concerned about the cybersecurity of the system onto which you report cybersecurity issues with your products. And this is a system that's going to be accessible across the whole of Europe to all 27 countries of the European Union. Accounts management, how's that going to happen? I'm actually involved with the single reporting platform testing. It starts today, and I was in a training session or a briefing session on Monday, and it seems quite clear to me that that's really not fit for purpose yet. I mean, all they're doing is they're talking about the functionality of it, but how you actually manage those accounts, which is actually going to be pretty important on this, that's not there. The detail of the data to go into the fields, all of the fields pretty much are free text. So when they pull all that information together, I don't know how they're going to how to aggregate all of that, and therefore it makes it difficult for us to understand what to put into those fields. And as I've already hinted, it's late. It should be ready in September of this year, but the obligation to use it is in September of this year. And as part of that, apparently, the way that you access the single reporting platform is via your national CCERT system. So the country that you declare as being the country that is your home base, in essence. So are they really going to have 27 integrations between this platform and those systems? I very much doubt it. So my prediction is the single reporting platform will not be ready in September, but we'll see what happens. Then there's a confused legal situation. So when we speak to the Commission in various standards groups and we talk about risk acceptance and risk thresholds, they basically say, no, you cannot transfer the risk to any of your customers. Basically, your product needs to be cyber secure, absolutely, no questions. And yet, if you read the legislation, actually, there is a place where you can declare essentially what risk you're passing over to the customer. So if there's a fundamental disconnect between what the Commission is saying and thinking and telling the standards writers, it's probably not surprising that the standards are late. Also, the standard scope the Commission will not allow the standard scope to be formally documented. So in most harmonised standards that are cited, there is a section at the back, Annex ZA, which says this is how it links into the regulation. But because the horizontal standards are not going to be cited, most of them, the Commission has said, well, because of that, we're not going to formally say which particular articles this standard is linked to. So if you take a standard and you want to use a different standard, you have no idea as to what the scope of the original standard that you've rejected was. So that basically means that you guys need literally to look at all the requirements, and I pointed you to it here, in the Act itself to make sure that you are covering off all of those requirements. Yeah, questions remain over many standards, which is why they're late. One of the biggest concerns that I've got is, and Richard mentioned this earlier, is that despite the fact we have these vertical standards, which are quite focused, they're still quite wide in themselves. So for example, take the routers and switches standard. That could apply to a switch that's used by a consumer at home, right the way through to a carrier grade router. They all use the same standard. There are options within the standard that you can choose to say, yeah, mine is the top of the range one, therefore these requirements apply. But at the end of the day, the consumer will only see the declaration of conformity. And on the declaration of conformity, it will just say, yeah, we use that standard. So the consumers will have no way of knowing which particular flavour of routers and switches is used. Now, a responsible manufacturer will tell them that. They will set in that out in some detail, but the regulation doesn't mandate that. So that's my last concern there is the fact that despite all of the effort the manufacturer is going to be putting in, consumers still won't have much idea as to what their product is doing. Oops, what have I done? Compliance pathway. These are the articles that I talked about earlier, articles 13 to 14. So this is going down into a bit more detail. I'm running out of time a little bit, so I'm going to skip on. But what I've highlighted in here is how do you demonstrate compliance with all of these important articles? So part one, the properties, that is 40,001-4, which is the derivative of the 1831 standard. That should be pretty straightforward, and hopefully you will be able to use the assessments that you carried out for Red Cyber with using that standard as well, because the standard hasn't moved on too far from that, thankfully. The vulnerability handling standard, well, that's not available until November 2026, but the regulation kicks in from September 2026, so go figure. In the meantime, you're either on your own, or to be fair, the draft versions of these standards are available online. Then you've got the information instructions to users. A lot of the information that's in there is the standard blue guide stuff. You know, the what the intended use is, CE marking stuff. That's all fine, but powers 5, 7, 8, and 9 are not covered. Likewise, the content of the technical documentation, a lot of standard blue guide stuff in there, but powers 2, 3, 4, and 8 are not there, and the detail is on the next slide. Then you've got obligations, other obligations. So this is the process stuff. That's covered by the 1-2 standard, so you should be okay there. But when it comes to the detail of what goes into the EUVD, when it comes to the detail of what goes into SRP, nothing is documented at the moment. So you need to make sure that you do that. If your product does fall into the category of important or critical products, then there will be a vertical standard associated with you. And these various other articles about CE marking, about conformity and what have you, that's kind of standard blue guide stuff. But the main message I'm giving you here is that there are these gaps here. Just because you follow the standards doesn't mean to say you are going to be compliant. There are other stuff you need to make sure you've done as well. And how am I doing for time, Chris? Am I keep going? Okay. So these are the detail gaps. I'm not obviously this is an eye chart, and I'm not going to go into detail on this. But what I've done here is highlighted those parts of the annexes that you need to make sure that you are taking note of, because it's different from anything you've had before. This is all the cybersecurity stuff. So I'm just going to go in on a couple of them, the ones in yellow. So the first one, information instructions to users. You need to say any known or foreseeable circumstance, basically that there could be a problem. So that's the idea of risk transfer. So basically, if you use this product in this way, then all bets are off. Don't say we didn't tell you in the first place. But also, actually no, there's one in front of this. It will be on the final slides that we send out. There's one there which basically talks about the intended use. That's standard Blue Guide stuff. But at the end of bullet point 4, it then says, tell us about your cybersecurity solution. And that's it. I can't remember the exact wording, but it's something like that. And that's what the manufacturers have to do to differentiate themselves from other products. So going back to the router standard, that's the only obligation they have. There's nothing particularly prescriptive in the regulation which says what they need to do. So a company that doesn't want to say too much won't say too much there, and the customer will be none the wiser. And then this one here, this one amused me. You need to document how changes to the product with digital elements can affect the security of data. I mean, that's a pretty broad statement there. I frankly have no idea how you would respond to that. So those are the gaps that are in there. So you'll have the slides afterwards, so you can look through those in your own time. So conclusions. There are a lot of gotchas out there. We all need to work together on this. There is, in my opinion, a very evident, high burden of evidence. The situation is with legal is confused, and I've just highlighted some of the concerns in there. There are problems around the SRP system, in particular the fact that it's simply not going to be ready in time. And there's also the compliance gap. So remember, not just the standards. You need to make sure you look at this presentation, and then you will know what you need to do. But my call to arms would be, we need to make sure that we've got better visibility of what's going on, and we need it sooner, and we need more guidance. The European Commission is trying to give us more information, but often that information is a little bit vague, and therefore in that vacuum, I would say that as an industry we need to come together and pull our collective interpretations of this together. Because I think if we're all together and we'll collectively say, well, this is what we think it is, hopefully that will mean that given this ambiguity around the regulation, no individual company will be singled out. And you as companies need to be working on this right now, because the first regulation comes in September, and then the main regulation obviously comes in December of next year. So those are some thoughts from me. Hopefully that was useful, and I think I'm on a panel later on. I'll leave it there.
Simon, Alex has got a question. Simon, Alex from Save Shark. I was just wondering, you mentioned the SRP trial.
Yes.
How do people get involved on that? Is there a way, is it open, or is there some information about it? Because if you go onto the SRP website, it just says, further instructions will be issued in June. Obviously we're in July.
Yeah.
So yeah, how is that available to
So because
Simon, can you just repeat the gist of the question, just for the video?
Yeah, indeed. Thanks, Alex. So the question is the single reporting platform that I said that I was involved with the testing on. How can Alex and other organisations get involved with that? Well, the reason I'm involved with it is because I saw this coming quite some time ago, and I nagged people. I met people from ENISA and said, I really want to be involved. So that's why I'm involved with it. I believe at the CRA expert group it was discussed, and they looked for volunteers there. But as you're aware, Alex, the CRA expert group is a very elite set of companies. So we haven't heard about it. The reality is the testing is this week and next week, so it's probably a bit late. But let's you and I have a chat afterwards. I can tell you what's going on. I can give you some feedback as to what my feeling is. I think it's probably a bit late, but I could forward on your email to the people that are running it and see if they could get you involved.
Thank you.
Okay, cheers. Okay, that's me.